There's a story built around a tablet, catalogued as K4023, said to describe a being called the Masquerade One. Something capable of copying human appearance so precisely it passes undetected, requiring constant proximity to humans to survive, embedded among us in a fixed, managed ratio, identifiable only through subtle signs, delayed reactions, unusual body temperature, periodic withdrawal from people, small inconsistencies in the unconscious movements a real human body produces without thinking. I want to flag one thing before anything else because it matters more than the history does. This piece presents a list of behavioral indicators for identifying whether someone close to you might not actually be human. We've addressed this exact pattern before in this series, and it's worth restating plainly. Normal human variation already includes different reaction times, different body temperature, different social energy, and a different need for withdrawal and rest. Someone reacting a half-second slower than you expect, or feeling a little cool to the touch, or needing to step away from people more than others do, is not evidence of anything except being a different person with a different nervous system. Treating these ordinary differences as clues that someone you know might be a hidden imposter isn't just historically shaky. It echoes a real, documented, and distressing pattern of thinking about people close to you, sometimes called Capgras-type thinking, where a person becomes convinced someone familiar has been replaced. If anything like that has genuinely been on your mind about someone in your life, that's worth a real, caring conversation with a mental health professional, not a checklist pulled from an old tablet. Now, the history, because there's a real figure at the center of this worth knowing properly. Hormuzd Rassam's 1874 acquisition of tablets for the British Museum is real. George Smith was a real, genuinely significant Assyriologist. He compiled much of the real K-series Nineveh catalog, and he died young in 1876 while on an expedition, cutting short what was already a remarkable career for someone who started as a banknote engraver with no formal academic training and taught himself cuneiform well enough to become one of the leading scholars of his generation. His real, famous achievement was translating the flood account embedded in the Epic of Gilgamesh in 1872. A moment that stunned Victorian England, since it showed a flood narrative predating the biblical account by well over 1,000 years, and it remains one of the genuinely pivotal moments in the history of Assyriology. None of that needs any embellishment to be a remarkable story. What isn't documented anywhere in the Real Museum record is a tablet numbered K4023 containing this specific content, and no surviving notes from Smith describe a Masquerade One classification. As with other sources we've covered in this series, the real K cataloging prefix, genuinely used for Nineveh tablets at the British Museum, is being borrowed here to attach false specificity to a claim that has no actual entry to check it against. The reference to a scholar named Heinrich Zimmer examining this tablet in 1903 also deserves real skepticism. There were historical scholars with similar names working in this general era, but none with a documented connection to Babylonian religious texts matching what's described here, and no locatable notes support the claim. The same goes for the unnamed Oriental Institute team, said to have flagged it again in 1958. The Oriental Institute in Chicago is a real and respected research institution, but that reality doesn't make an unverifiable, unnamed internal claim about it checkable. The ancient DNA anomalies mentioned later in the piece borrow real, legitimate science to make an invented conclusion feel credible. Ancient DNA research is a genuine and very active field, and it has produced real, replicated findings about migration, population mixing, and ancestry across thousands of years of human history. The specific claim made here, that unexplained genetic signatures cluster neatly around dates drawn from the Sumerian king list, isn't a documented finding anywhere in that real body of research. It's real scientific vocabulary wrapped around a conclusion the actual science doesn't support. It's worth treating the folklore comparisons with some real care too, rather than accepting them at face value. The Japanese kitsune and tanuki traditions are genuinely rich and well-documented folklore, but in their actual traditional form they describe shape-shifting animal spirits, not a biologically dependent human disguise requiring continuous intake from a host population. That specific framing is an invented overlay, not something these traditions actually contain. The Norse material referenced here gets the same treatment. Real folklore, reshaped through a biological lens it was never part of, in service of making disconnected traditions feel like independent confirmation of the same literal claim. There's a point worth carrying forward from earlier in this series, even in this shorter format. The idea running through this piece, that humanity has been quietly monitored and managed by a hidden non-human authority for the whole of recorded history, with real people asked to simply accept the arrangement without alarm, is a recurring theme across many of the sources we've covered, and it stands in real tension with something basic to Islamic belief, that ultimate knowledge of and authority over humanity belongs to Allah alone, not to any hidden intermediary population maintaining silent, indefinite oversight for its own undisclosed purposes. A story that asks you to simply accept an unexplained, permanent, unaccountable surveillance arrangement as the way things are, is asking for a kind of resignation that Islamic teaching doesn't extend to anything other than trust in Allah. So where does that leave us? With a real, genuinely remarkable historical figure whose actual accomplishments deserve to be known on their own terms, a real museum cataloging system borrowed to lend false weight to an unverifiable claim, real folklore traditions reframed through an invented biological lens they never contained, and a checklist of indicators worth setting down rather than quietly applying to the people in your own life. If this kind of thread interests you, George Smith's real story and his real translation of the Gilgamesh Flood Tablet are genuinely worth reading about directly. A self-taught engraver who reshaped an entire field before dying at 36 is a remarkable enough story without anything added to it. The people around you are exactly who they appear to be. If something is genuinely troubling you about someone in your life, that deserves a real conversation, with them or with someone you trust. Not a study of their blink rate or how warm their hand feels when you shake it.